So today is a continuation of the different components of the Amazon Web Services. So just to quickly recap on last week's topics, last week we saw these three components of AWS, that is EC2, S3 and Aurora. So just to refresh your memory, AWS, we said it's a cloud computing platform, and it offers different database and data processing and analytics related services, which we can use on a pay as you go basis. So you only pay for what you use, and one of the biggest advantage of using this kind of a cloud computing infrastructure is that it is flexible, as in you can scale up or down the number of instances based on your requirements, and then you only have to pay for the actual quantity and the number of hours that you use it for. Okay, so last week we saw regarding these three components, EC2, S3 and Aurora. So EC2, we said it's something like a virtual machine which offers a platform for you to run different AWS services, and then S3 is nothing but a data lake. So it is something like file system where you can upload different types of files. You can upload all types of files over there. Typically used for archiving. It's not a high performance database system, but rather it is used for storing large amounts of data. Typically it can also be used to store unstructured data as well. And then we saw about Aurora, which we said was your traditional relationship database management system, where data is stored in the form of rows and columns. So these are the topics that we covered last week. So today we'll be looking at these four components of AWS. First one is DynamoDB, then we have Redshift, then SageMaker and EMR. Okay. So before we go into the concept of DynamoDB, I'll just talk a little bit about NoSQL databases. Now, in fact, the NoSQL database came up during yesterday's session as well, when we were discussing the software called PostgreSQL. Okay. So NoSQL is a short form for not only SQL. Okay. So the meaning of this is basically it can store data in the form of the relational database. That is, it can store data in the form of rows and columns, but also it can store data in other formats. So that is the concept of not only SQL. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. The second point, can store a variety of data models. It does not have a database schema to be specific, because only your traditional RDBMS has a schema and everything. But if you go for other types of data or unstructured data, it does not have the database schema. Okay. So there are four types of NoSQL databases. First is key value, then you have something called as document, then there is columnar database, and then there is graph database. Okay. So most of the terminology that we'll be looking at during today's session, you might have come across it at some point of time or the other. Okay, so maybe while going through articles or reading some blogs on the internet or whatever, you might have come across this terminology. And also, as data scientists or professionals in the data science field, it is important for us to know or be familiar with the meaning of these terminologies. Okay. So there are these four types of NoSQL databases. I'll be going through them one by one. So NoSQL is a form of distributed computing. Okay, so NoSQL databases, typically, if you see, the data is stored across many servers. Okay, so this is to enable parallel processing. I'll also talk about what is parallel processing in a subsequent slide, but this is a brief introduction about the NoSQL database. So going to the different types of the NoSQL databases, first one you have is the document database. So here the document database is used to store semi-structured data and their description. So description of the data, typically it is called as metadata. Okay. So the data as well as the metadata is stored in the document format. So this is used in applications such as blogging platforms, web analytics and e-commerce applications. So examples of document databases are CouchDB and MongoDB. Okay. Next type of NoSQL database is graph database. So here the data is stored as nodes and edges. So the nodes are similar to the rows that you have in your relational database. Okay, and the edges or the connections between the nodes basically indicate the relationship between the different data points. Okay. So in use cases where you have to represent data in the form of relationships, so social media, reservation system, customer relationship management systems, and so on, graph databases are used heavily. Most common examples are IBM Graph and Neo4j. Next type of NoSQL database is something called as key value store. This is also a very widely used type of database. So here the concept is like there is something called as a key, and this unique key is paired with an associated value. Okay, so this is actually used or fine-tuned or designed for faster performance. So this concept of having a unique key in the database and attributing that unique key to a particular value is used to quickly reference a particular data point and quickly retrieve it from the database. So even if you have a large amount of data, having this key value, storing it in the form of this key value pair enables faster retrieval and processing of the data. Okay, so in your real-time analysis requirements, or where the cache memory requirements are high, so cache, if you see, it's a form of a volatile memory in your computer. Okay, so it's something like when you're running a particular application, the memory requirements are stored in the cache that is a CACHE. So that whatever you stored in that cache memory exists only during the runtime of that application. So any real-time processing that you do, or any processing of streaming data or something like that, you store the data in the form of key value pairs. Typically, if you see shopping cart data, session details for multiplayer gaming, so these sorts of applications you use key value databases. Examples here are DynamoDB and Redis. So DynamoDB is one of the services offered by AWS. We'll be looking at it in detail. So the next type of NoSQL database is wide column stores. Okay. So here also data is stored in the form of rows and columns, but it is not a standard rows and columns like what we have in the traditional RDBMS, because in the wide column format, the column names and the formatting can vary from row to row. So that is the wide column store. So this is used in applications such as recommendation engines, fraud detection, and event logging. Typical examples here are Cassandra and HBase. Okay, so this is about the NoSQL databases. Any questions until now before we move to the next concept?
All clear from my side, sir.
All right. So, go to the next one. Okay. So now let's go into the different components that we have on today's agenda. First one is the DynamoDB. So, like I was mentioning, DynamoDB is a form of NoSQL database service. The advantage is that it is scalable like any other AWS service. You can increase or decrease the database capacity based on your requirements. And the other advantage is that it is a low latency database. So latency is the delay that you get. So you query the database, okay, and then that query takes some time to process and then give the data back to you, right? So that time period is reduced in DynamoDB. That is what we call as low latency. Okay, and it is so fast that the performance level of a query is in single digit milliseconds. Okay, so 1 millisecond, 2 milliseconds, and so on. So many times, if you run the query on, I'm sure Jagadish or Sanjay might be familiar, or even Swap for that matter. If you run the query on the SQL Server Management Studio, then it might take something like, depending on the database, depending on the query and everything, it might take in the form of a few minutes. So it could also go up to 10 minutes or 15 minutes or so on. Okay. But if you use this kind of a scalable, low latency database, it's DynamoDB, your query performance level is at single digit milliseconds, even for heavy duty queries. Okay. So the reason for this is that the data is stored on solid state drives. So I told you, right, this concept of cloud computing, the data is stored in Amazon server or Google server or Microsoft server, depending on whose service you use. Okay, and this physical presence of that server is somewhere else. It's stored in some remote location. Okay, but there in that remote location, they stored the data on solid state drives to enable the high input output performance. So that is why you have low latency in DynamoDB. Okay. So again, last week also we saw this concept of replication. So replication is nothing but splitting up, replicating and distributing your data over multiple geographical areas. Okay. So these geographical areas in Amazon terminology, it is called as availability zone. Okay. So there in one region you can have many availability zones. Okay, so let's say for example in Asia Pacific you can have three availability zones or 4 availability zones and so on. Okay, so in one region itself your data will be replicated across multiple zones. Okay, so in one region itself you will have multiple copies of data. You also have the option of cross-region replication. That is, you can choose to store your data in Asia Pacific region as well as in North America region, so that even if you feel that due to some reason or the other, even if the data centers in one whole region goes down, then you will also always have a backup in another region. So in order to ensure that backup and availability of data even in case of any untoward incident, you have the replication facility. And there are no limits on data storage per user. You have unlimited storage, but the only thing is that you will have to pay for how much ever storage you use. Okay, and the DynamoDB, another feature is that it integrates with something called as AWS Lambda. Okay, so AWS Lambda is another service offered on the AWS platform. So this is something like automating the running of a particular piece of code. Okay, so let's say for example you have raw data coming in from your sales transactions, POS transactions. Okay, so you can have a piece of code which will transform that raw data into a particular structure. Okay, so using this service of AWS Lambda, what you can do is you can automate the running of that particular piece of code. You can schedule that code to run at specific points of time at whenever you specify. Okay, so once you set that up, the code will run automatically as per the schedule, and the processing will also happen automatically. Okay, so you can integrate this DynamoDB with the AWS Lambda service to automate your data processing operations. Okay, so that's what you're saying here. Integrates with AWS Lambda to code actions based on updates to items. So any updates to data that you want to perform, any transformation that you want to do your data, you can automate this with by integrating AWS Lambda to DynamoDB. Any questions until now? Okay, so let me go to the next component, that is Amazon Redshift. Okay, so Amazon Redshift is a fully managed petabyte scale cloud-based data warehouse service. Okay, so Redshift is also very similar to Amazon Aurora and S3. So if you remember, we saw these concepts of Aurora and S3 last week, right? So Aurora, we said it was a relational database management system. S3, it's a data lake. Okay, Redshift is also something similar. Here also you can use Redshift for data storage. Okay, but the difference between Aurora, S3 and Redshift is in terms of the cost and the data storage capacity that it offers. Okay, so S3, if you see, you can store vast amounts of data typically used for archiving purposes. Okay, but the disadvantage of S3 is that it does not offer faster performance. The data querying and the processing speeds are very low. Okay, Aurora also it's something similar, but the limitation of Aurora is not only in terms of the processing speed. There's a size limit also. The maximum capacity offered by Amazon Aurora is 64 terabytes. Okay, and the cost is also different. So typically, if you see, Amazon Redshift costs around $0.25 per hour. The price starts from $0.25 per hour, Amazon Aurora, if you see, it starts at $0.04 per hour. So there is the price difference as well as the capacity difference that comes into play. So these are so though Redshift, Aurora, and S3 are all used for data storage, the difference comes in terms of the pricing and the capacity and the processing speed that each software package offers. Okay. So if you look at the first point, I put fully managed. Okay. So what it basically means is all your database administration services, such as configuring the database parameters or backing up the data, all these features are automated. So that is what we call as fully managed data warehouse service. Okay. So this is used for large-scale data storage. So again, contrasting this with Aurora, the limit is 64 terabytes in Aurora, but Redshift you can go in even in terms of petabytes. Okay. So large-scale data storage analysis and data migration. So you can also Redshift also has the RDBMS component. You can store data in the form of relational database. So this is based on the PostgreSQL, and each data warehouse in your Amazon Redshift contains a collection of nodes, or the nodes are basically computing resources. Okay, so these nodes are organized in the form of clusters, and each cluster contains at least one database. Okay, and the reason for storing the data in the form of clusters is to enable that distributed computing. Okay, so this works on a principle called as the massively parallel processing, or MPP. Okay, so what it does is it automatically distributes the workload evenly across multiple nodes in each cluster. Okay, so what did we say here? We said that each cluster contains at least 1 DB. Okay, and the data in this one single database is split across multiple nodes. Okay, so when you run a query on that database, your query will run in parallel across all of those nodes. Okay, so let's say you have some 10 nodes and each node contains 1 GB of data. Okay, so at any particular point in time, you will be able to query that entire the 10 GB of data, because you will be processing each 1 GB cluster in parallel. So this is to help you get faster results while querying. So that is the concept of parallel processing or distributed computing. Okay. So just to see one possible application of how Redshift and S3 work together. So you have IoT devices today, right? So IoT devices are nothing but devices based on the Internet of Things concept, where you have sensors placed on different types of equipment. These sensors constantly keep sending telemetry data regarding the status of that device and so on. Okay, and Amazon has another service called as Kinesis, which is used to process streaming data. So that's what I put here: service load streaming data. So the data from these different sensors is fed in real time via this Amazon Kinesis, and this is stored in the S3 system. Okay, so remember last week I was saying that S3 can store unstructured data. One form of that unstructured data is the JSON data. That is not your typical rows and columns data, but data that comes from your hardware systems, right? So that data, if you see, it is stored in the S3 database. Okay, and you can access the data in S3. Okay, and any sort of a transformation that you want to apply on it, you apply it on the Amazon Redshift. Okay, so why do we do that? We can still process the data in S3 itself, but the performance levels are low. Okay, so to enable faster processing, we use Amazon Redshift to run our queries. Okay, and then the outputs we put them as BI dashboards. Okay, so this is how these two services of Redshift and S3 work together.
Sorry, so I completely didn't understand the what Kinesis is doing there. Like, is it just loading the data from IoT devices into S3, or
yeah? So it is just a conduit for you to your pipeline for you to take your data from your devices and load it onto S3.
Okay, so it helps us transfer the data.
Yeah, so that's why the name itself, they're named as Firehose, just to draw an analogy with a pipeline.
Okay.
So real-time streaming data, you transfer it from your physical devices, that is the sensor data. In real time, you transfer it to your data lake in S3.
Okay, got it. Understood.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, let me move on to the next concept. So the next component that we're going to be looking at is called as SageMaker. Okay. Now all of the components that we have been looking at until now is on the data engineering front. Okay. So data storage, data retrieval, querying, etc. Okay. Now this is where we go into the data analytics part. So SageMaker and the next component that we are going to see is something called as EMR. So both are related to machine learning and predictive modeling. So SageMaker is a service used to prepare, build, train, and deploy machine learning models. Okay. So yeah. So what SageMaker does, it uses common algorithms and other tools to accelerate the machine learning process. Okay. So basically your typical data science life cycle that you have, right? So data preparation, modeling, or training the model, and then deploying the model in production. So all these processes are enabled by the Amazon SageMaker service. So what it does is, it will create something called as a machine learning instance in EC2. So EC2 is that virtual machine which can run on Windows or Linux. So you log on to that virtual machine, you create something called as a machine learning instance. Okay. And any machine learning model that you want to create, you write the coding on the Jupyter notebook inside the EC2 machine learning instance in EC2. Okay. So Jupyter notebook, if you remember, Akhil had been giving us a few sessions on Python, and he was demonstrating the usage of Python or the coding of Python via this Jupyter notebook. Okay. Now Jupyter can also be used for any other software package such as R. R code also you can write in Jupyter notebook. So what Amazon has done is, it has offered this Jupyter notebook as part of its services in the SageMaker package. So you set up a virtual machine, then you use Jupyter notebook to code your machine learning algorithm. Okay, and you can connect to other AWS components such as the S3. So for example, let's say you want to run an image processing application, right? So image is an unstructured data. Okay, so that image data will be stored in the form of image files in your S3 data lake. Okay, and you can connect to that S3 data lake via this SageMaker, and then you can run your image processing or image classification algorithms using SageMaker. Okay, and there's no limit to the data set size that it can connect to. Okay, and it also provides certain additional features such as algorithm ranking, iteration tracking, code sharing, etc. So algorithm ranking is nothing but, let's say you on one particular data set you're trying different algorithms like a random forest or a logistic regression, or any other classification technique. Okay, so it will rank each of these algorithms based on the accuracy. Okay, and then iteration tracking is nothing but, if you take one particular algorithm, every time you fine tune the parameters of that algorithm, your accuracy might vary, right? So SageMaker has a feature that shows you what's the difference in accuracy that you obtained every time you made those little tweaks in your model. Okay, so code sharing is nothing but the ML code that you write, you can share it with other members of your team. It is self-explanatory. But so these are the features available in Amazon SageMaker. So the last concept for today is something called as EMR. So this is a short form for Elastic MapReduce. Okay, so MapReduce, I'm sure some of you might be familiar with that term. So it is a programming model that enables distributed computing. Okay, basically a tool for big data processing and analysis. So this MapReduce is often used in the context of Hadoop. Okay, so Hadoop, if you see, Hadoop is something called as a distributed file system. So they call it HDFS, Hadoop Distributed File System, where like I was mentioning a couple of slides back, the data has been stored in multiple clusters, and any analysis or any processing that you want to do on that data, that processing happens in parallel. Basically, that workload is split across all that cluster, all those clusters, and all of those workloads are processed in parallel so that you get your results quickly. Okay, so the MapReduce is something which enables this parallel processing. So that's why we call it as a programming model that enables distributed computing. Okay, so the EMR service provided by AWS is based on this Hadoop framework, and it supports processing of large data sets in a distributed computing environment. Okay, so what it does is it helps you, or it allows you to process data with open source tools such as Hive and Spark. So Hive and Spark, these are nothing but interfaces or programming languages that you use to interact with your Hadoop distributed file systems. Okay, so let's say you stored data in your Hadoop. Okay, so there's something called as a Hive query language. So it is very similar to SQL. Okay, so just like SQL, which is used to interact with your RDBMS, you have Hive, which you use to interact with your data in the Hadoop distributed file system. Okay, so what EMR does is it allows you to use the languages such as Hive or Spark to interact with databases in a distributed computing environment. So again, if you ask why should we use EMR rather than going ahead with a traditional Hadoop, so the advantages are that scalability and the cost. So according to Amazon's own claims, it is many times less expensive than your traditional big data software. Okay, so any questions here on this? Okay, so just to
sorry, just out of curiosity, the Hadoop distributed file system, it's not, does it store data in itself, or does it rely on any other databases like SQL or any other like S3 or for instance?
It has something called as HBase, which is, I think it's a form of a NoSQL database.
Okay.
It can store relational database management, the rows and columns tabular data, as well as other unstructured data.
Okay, so, got it.
So a traditional like SQL database, can you use it, or do we have to use any of these this specified software?
I would say it depends on the particular use case, Chaitanya. For conventional use cases, we can use RDBMS, or in case we are dealing with the JSON data or image data, then we would have to go with some other sort of file system.
Okay, got it. So basically, depending on our use case, we can use whichever,
yes.
But this is more like a file system kind of a thing, right?
Yes.
That's what you're saying? Okay.
Okay, so now that we have looked at different components offered by the AWS platform, we will just do a quick summary of how what these different components are and what is the relationship between them. Okay, so the first concept that we saw is the Amazon S3 data lake, right? So you can store huge amounts of data, structured as well as unstructured. Okay, and whatever data is present in the data lake, you can access that data via Amazon Redshift. You can directly query the data lake itself, but the query performance is not going to be that great. So that is why you use Amazon Redshift to access that data. Okay, and Amazon Redshift, we said it is a data warehouse. Okay, and this data warehouse has different databases, and typically your relational database management system, when it comes to the AWS platform, is offered in two packages, Aurora and RDS. Difference being in terms of the capacity as well as the pricing packages offered. And on the right, we have the machine learning oriented packages. So SageMaker, EMR, and Amazon Athena. So Amazon Athena we haven't seen until now. Maybe we'll cover it in the next week. So these are applications that you use to do any predictive modeling on your data in your data warehouse or different databases. And you also have something called as Amazon QuickSight, and you can have other third-party business intelligence tools to visualize the data present in your databases. So this is how the different components of AWS that we have seen until now interact with each other. Any questions or doubts?
So one last question related to SQL databases and NoSQL databases. We just discussed that NoSQL databases can also act like in the place of relational data. We can also use them as relational database.
Yes.
So one thing that so typically relational databases, as the amount of data increases, the performance decreases. The volume of data increases, the query performance takes longer and longer.
Right.
So if we use a NoSQL database for our relational database needs, so as of now, so does it affect the query performance there, or can we expect like higher performances even the data as the data scales up in NoSQL database?
Yeah, so I would say that will be based on the form or the type of the NoSQL database that you're using. So typically, if you see the limit or the reduction in performance that we see in the traditional RDBMS comes because of limitations in the server, right? So let's say, for example, you're using a MySQL on your desktop. Your data processing capability is limited by the hardware offered by your computer, right? But if you use the same RDBMS on the AWS platform, even though if you observe that your processing time is limited initially, you can scale your server capacity so that you can get faster processing, right? The same goes for NoSQL as well. And I think as far as I have seen, for a given amount of server or processing capacity, the performance of the RDBMS, whether it's in a traditional Amazon Aurora kind of a RDBMS or if it's in a NoSQL database like DynamoDB, I believe the times are going to be the same.
Okay.
So the difference will come if we scale up our computing infrastructure. So that's why, in fact, I believe that will be one of the biggest reasons why companies opt for cloud computing, because it offers them that flexibility. So if they want to have quicker results, then for that particular duration alone, they can just scale up their capacity, and then to avoid additional costs, they can just scale it down back later.
Understood. Got it.